Hey there, folks. We have just heard from President Biden about why he now thinks the best way for him to serve the country is to not serve a second term. And with that, welcome to this very special episode of Amy and TJ Robes. We have now seen and heard from President Biden for the first time since his decision to get out of the race. And what were you expecting versus what we got?
Well, okay. So a lot of things, actually. So I knew it would be probably short, but it was much shorter than I expected. 11, 12 minutes, depending on who was doing the timing.
Started on time, 8 o'clock Eastern.
He did
right?
start right on time, and I clocked it as 8:12 when he was done.
Okay.
So that was a little shocking at just how short it was. I was surprised that he never explained why he was getting out of the race. He never addressed the issues about the accusations about his mental acuity. He never even touched on that. And he barely spoke, I think it was one line, about the woman he endorsed, Kamala Harris. So those things all surprised me.
And let's go back here. We and folks, the setup here was that this was the speech in which this was the legacy speech. This is when he was supposed to talk about what he has done as president and why he's getting out of the race and for it to be for the betterment of the country. Now, he did do this from the Oval Office. This was a primetime speech. He was in a Navy suit, that's a royal blue tie. He looked sharp. He looked pretty good. He's gotten a little rest, I suppose, because he has been in isolation with COVID. But some of the details and things we couldn't see and couldn't know while the speech was going on, if you were watching it on television, is that his family was in the room. He had a number of members of his family, Robes, that were lining the wall. So they were sitting around the wall of the Oval Office. And who was it that was sitting actually closest to him along that wall is one of the family members that a lot of people say he should have been trying to distance himself from.
Yeah, and someone who I have spent quite a bit of time with, Hunter Biden. He was right next to him, and his daughter Ashley was next to Hunter. And notably, Dr. Jill Biden, his wife, was at the far end. So, but yeah, this was a historic moment. This was a painful moment for him personally, for the family. He absolutely did not want to get out of the race. This was not something that he personally wanted to do. There was clearly political pressure, and some people have suggested this was even a political intervention of sorts. So this resignation wasn't necessarily something he chose. A lot of people have said he was forced out. So this had to be an incredibly painful evening for President Biden and for every member of his family who supported him.
Painful. It adds to the political theater we have seen, but it's been historical theater, it seems, in this particular cycle. But here we are watching, and I guess not something I would ever think I would see necessarily in my lifetime. This wasn't a resignation, but this was a sitting president deciding not to, voluntarily deciding. Okay, yes, some people will debate that word, if this was voluntary, but he's making the choice to step aside. So you got, in our history, Lyndon Johnson, I guess, was the most famous one. What was the line? I will not accept. What's the line? He had the very famous line about not accepting the nomination.
Correct,
you
yes.
know what I'm talking about.
1968, that's how far you have to go back. So many people, present parties included, this is the first time in our lifetimes we have seen a sitting president stand back and say, I will not run for president again, despite the fact that he had been elected through the primary process to be the nominee.
And it's so rare. We're up to 46, right? We have 46 presidents, 46. But we're talking, what? We got Coolidge, Truman, Hayes, Buchanan, Polk, I believe. We got several that this actually happened in our history, but it's just such a rare thing to take place. So, this was a tough and it was an emotional night and something still he did not want to do. But the content, I guess, Robes, of what he was trying to get across tonight, and he used this line, you'll see it everywhere, is that kings don't rule here. And that was really a theme of what his speech was. He started off pretty much that way, saying this is not who we are. We have presidents. Our presidents are not kings. And He never mentioned Donald Trump a single time during the speech. He never even said anything like the other candidate. He didn't say the other side. But he tried to, Robes, make that point that he was doing this as a matter of showing who we are, the republic. That is an idea that we haven't quite made it there, but we are still trying.
So he talked about how he revered the office of the presidency, but that he loved his country more. And that was one of the reasons why he said he was stepping down. But as you point out, he never mentioned the other party. He never mentioned Donald Trump. And yet he did make this about protecting democracy, directly implying that voting for Donald Trump would be a vote against democracy. And I think so a lot of folks who are undecided or who are on the side of Trump look at this as something that didn't feel genuine. So here we have President Biden saying that he is trying to unite the country. He said we have a choice between hope and hate, unity versus division. He asked whether or not character and public life still mattered. And so he was clearly drawing a line in the sand and basically saying that a vote for Trump would be a vote against democracy. So this wasn't necessarily a speech to the American public. It absolutely was a political speech. And so he had the opportunity perhaps not to do that. And yet I understand we're in a political season that is as tough as it's ever been. And so he took the opportunity to toe the party line, but did it in the veil or acting as though he were doing this for the American people. And so I think a lot of people who, and this is a divided country, you look at this and say, you know, he could have been a little bit more unifying.
Okay, I mean, I absolutely think that he believes he was being unifying in what he was saying. I know politics always plays into this, but I think he genuinely believes that the country needs to come together. I think a lot of people believe the country needs to come together. And he thought this was, he talked about the uniting the country, but he also talked about uniting the party. He spoke specifically about the onus being on you, the voter, the American public, to save the democracy is the line he used. Save the democracy. The onus is on you to do so. And his role in doing that is to step aside. It's a step aside. He said it is now the best way forward is for him to pass the torch to another generation. So there's a time and place for experience. That time and place is not now. The time and place is now for a younger generation and younger voices. We understand. I mean, this guy's been in public office for 50 years, and maybe some are arguing that the biggest service he has done to the country is to stop serving the country. That's got to be tough to stomach tonight. It's a tough night for the Biden family.
Absolutely. It is a difficult thing to do. And I think anybody could put themselves in that position and think, wow, this thing you love, this thing you've worked your whole life for, this thing you truly, and I do believe in his genuine care and concern for our country and the direction it's headed and where he wants to see it go. So 100%, his heart is in the right place. But it's just, it is a tough thing to watch. And it had to have required so much strength to be able to deliver that speech with not just the world watching, but his family, even more so watching him just from a few feet away.
It's a
humbling experience. And you know, as we all age, we all, I think, fear what happens with age and where we're all headed. And so it's tough to watch because we're all headed in that direction and we won't be our sharpest the older we get. And just watching him, unfortunately, have to acknowledge that in a very public way is difficult to witness. It certainly is. But he did not go into any of those details about where he is, mentally. And I, you know, maybe this is silly of me, maybe this is the woman in me, but I actually kind of wanted to hear how he felt emotionally about it. Maybe that doesn't matter, but I kind of wanted to see the human side of what he's been through over the last few days and what led him to this decision. I was hoping that maybe we would hear some of that because that just would have felt, I don't know, honest and real and human. And I think I'm desperate for that in politics. And maybe that's just the a silly thing for me to even want to reach to, because no one would dare do that. But I actually think it's so powerful when people are human. And I wanted a little bit more of that.
But, it was a very human. We all seen people in our families grow older. He did not address this in that way. We can all kind of relate. But watching him on TV tonight, if you got a chance to, or you'll see clips at some point, is one thing. I think the most powerful images of the night are the still images of his family lined up along the walls of that Oval to watch this guy they love have to do something that we know he did not want to do. Yeah. So he will, no matter what. He's going to remain president. He says he's still got some work to do over the next several months, things he wants to get accomplished. He mentioned some of them, including Supreme Court reform tonight. Again, like I said, he did not mention Donald Trump by name, but he did mention Kamala Harris, like you were saying, Robes. I guess it makes sense now that I sit here, but at the time, I thought he thought there'd be two sentences. There was essentially one. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable, and that was kind of it. But maybe that's okay. This is not supposed to be her night. She'll have plenty of attention and eyeballs on her. But that was the nod he still gave tonight.
Yeah, I guess I wish I could have heard more from him, from his heart, more from him about what this decision was like for him, more from him about where he is in his life. And I just wanted more. I think 12 minutes wasn't enough. I wish I could have heard more from him. And then there would have been maybe, a little bit more time to give Kamala a little bit more of a nod. I do, and I don't want to harp too much on what he didn't say. Something he did say struck me. And we were watching the analysis before, and we watched some of the analysis. Afterwards, we had all the networks up. We had two computers up and the actual television set. So we watched the MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. So we're getting it from all the different vantage points. But I didn't hear anybody point this out yet. But there was a point in his speech where he said, he said, "I promise to level with you. I promise to tell you the truth." And then he didn't say anything beyond that. And I was kind of holding my breath because I was hoping he was going to then maybe go into some of those details I was talking about. Because as you know, if you've been watching, and I'm sure if you will watch any of the political commentary following this and leading up to the election, one of the big allegations the Republicans and the right are going to point to not just Joe Biden and the Joe Biden administration, but Kamala as well, and anyone associated with them, is that they were covering up Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And so that's going to be a huge, huge part of this campaign going forward. So anyway, I just wondered if that part of his speech will come back to bite him, because he made a point to say that he was leveling with the American people and telling us the truth. And that's what's in question from the other side.
That is what I think a lot of people were holding their breath for tonight. If there's going to be look from the other side, there'll be a criticism. But to that exact point, he didn't, if he thinks that he's getting out of the race now because he thinks it's the best for the country and the party, there is a why do you think that's the best for the country and the party? The why was not answered. He only said it's time for younger voices. When did he come to that conclusion about when it's time for younger voices? And why didn't you come to this conclusion several months ago or before the primaries actually started? That the why. So a lot of the why has to do with, for those on the outside, his cognitive ability, how he performed in that debate. He's old now and he's not up for the task. He never addressed age or anything about his cognitive ability. And so his reasons for getting out of the race, at least listening to this 12-minute speech, had nothing to do with that. And I don't think a lot of people are going to buy that for a second. So, Robes, that we both sat on the edge of our seat. Truth and being transparent with you, I promised I would do that. And then it trailed off. We were sitting up waiting. This is going to be the moment.
Yeah, I perked up.
And there was nothing after that, really.
Yeah. I mean, I do appreciate the sentiment he made about the fact that nothing can come in the way of the greater good. And he pointed out not even personal ambition. And I do know that watching him tonight, he has clearly set aside personal ambition. It's something that has motivated, I'm sure, and driven him and driven many of us in our careers to get to where he is. And to have to set that aside is a big deal. And we saw him do that tonight. And for that, I do think, you never know how the history books will look on a president, but I do think for this moment, for his choice, how he got to it can be up for debate. But the fact that he did come to this evening and make this speech, I think people will look back and say this was an act of generosity. This was an act for the greater good, and certainly a selfless one, and a difficult one, and a humbling one to do and then to witness.
You say a humbling one, but how history we'll never know. But we just need to, I guess, how are people going to receive this over just the next few months?
Yeah.
Because this, the idea, that's how it's going to be spun on one side. He is so committed to making sure the democracy is preserved and that Donald Trump isn't in the White House. He is so committed to that he's willing to get out of the race. Compare that, folks, to the other side and Donald Trump, who was willing to do whatever it took to stay in power. Now, that is an argument that one side is going to try to make and juxtapose those two images. The side, or the argument the other side is going to make, is he's out of the race because he got pushed out by his own people. They saw their chances and they didn't like it. So they just decided to switch horses. And by the way, they've been covering up for the longest his ability to do the job. That is the other side, the other argument. And what he didn't do tonight was answer any critic that might have a question about how he's doing as an 81-year-old man.
Yeah, because there are genuine concerns about what the next 6 months look like. Is he the president? Is he leading with Kamala? And has that been happening? We don't know. And a lot of people are asking that question. I don't think he made people feel better about that with this speech, and he had the opportunity to do that. And I
never mention age, folks. Let's be clear.
No,
not once.
No,
not anything about his
like
mental
the elephant
capacity
in the room wasn't
never
acknowledged.
Yes.
And that is part of the problem with politics in general, because don't we see that all the time from so many people? So I'm curious, are we going to see Joe out in the campaign trail with Kamala? Is Kamala going to distance herself from him? Is he going to lay low? I mean, there's a lot of questions about what the next few weeks and months are going to be like, but I fear that the tone is, we talked about how we were hopeful, maybe just, think about the last 4 weeks. You go from that debate that set this whole entire night in motion and to an assassination attempt to today. I mean, I can't even recall 4 weeks like this in political history that I've witnessed in my life, like I've seen in the last 4 weeks. And I can't even imagine what the next few months are going to be like.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's like I can't even imagine.
So there's a sprint to the finish line, I guess, for Vice President Harris now, and everybody's up giving all the scenarios for how her pathways to victory in the Electoral College. So you'll see a lot of that. The thing, however, look, you will see a lot about favorables and unfavorables. Joe Biden's approval rating was somewhere in the mid 30s. Kamala Harris's was somewhere in the high 30s.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe a little bump and whatnot. But what the Democrats just gave Americans who weren't excited at all about this election, which might be the thing that tips the scale. They just gave them something that people were desperate for, an alternative to two old guys who were in the last matchup. Yeah. Like, we don't give us anything other than this. And Democrats just gave it to them. Here's an alternative. Here, you didn't want these two guys. A lot of people didn't want that matchup. So could that be one of the things? And of course, the black vote, and specifically, we have seen today all over television, black women rallying, or black women is going to be a very big focal point of this, of the Harris campaign, to try to drive a vote, because it's going to be necessary. Now, but to see some of that come through in the speech tonight, we've turned another page in this election. But that's huge. They've given people what they desperately, a lot of people weren't excited about either one of these candidates. No, but we know this. Oh, we've seen that lack of enthusiasm.
Well,
We know
it's
that.
a rematch. So it's like, really, we can't get someone other than these two Caucasian old, men. Yes, that's been a big complaint, and now there is an alternative, and we'll see what happens. But we've already started to see the coverage switch, and it's on. The politics and at its worst, perhaps, is on. I mean, I wish it wouldn't be that way, but I think we're in for a difficult next few months.
We always said, look, the country's been through worse, right? And we'll make it through this like we made it through everything else. But what a night for the guy. Has 50 years of service, and his biggest act, and some are arguing now, is that he is deciding not to serve. And you're going to hear a line a lot out there about a kid with a stutter. And that's how he described himself tonight, as a kid with a stutter who ascended to the presidency. And that same kid with a stutter was in the Oval Office tonight, having to do what was, I would argue, maybe the most difficult thing he's had to do in his professional career. And we know it was something he did not want to do. And for his family, and look, for people who love him and support him, you can see them all over. Sometimes the way they speak about him on television, people who have worked for him. Look, it's a tough day. And that image, right? It looked, the image outside the White House of all the staffers. We've been seeing that video going to a watch party at the White House. It's kind of sad, like a slow procession.
Yeah, they said there was going to be pizza and beer and wine. So it was this bizarre, obviously it wasn't celebratory, and yet they were still perhaps applauding his decision to do the right thing by the party, and he would say for the country. I heard one commentator say this, so I wouldn't ever claim this, but I thought it was so well said before the speech began. She said, this is the most important speech he never wanted to give. And it may be the thing he's most remembered for. We heard him tonight talk about all of his accomplishments as president, and I'm sure he will remember those, but this perhaps will be the thing he's remembered most for, stepping down and letting that fresher, younger voice carry on.
And now, just as the news keeps coming in, you'll see an image of it, but Dr. Biden, the First Lady, they've been showing this handwritten note that she sent to staff, but the contents of that note, she says, to those who never wavered, to those who refused to doubt, to those who always believed, my heart is full of gratitude. Thank you for the trust you put in Joe. Now it's time to put that trust in Kamala. So a page is being turned. How much we'll see? Will we see that much of him? How much are we, right? We have to turn that page. And sure, he'll be on the campaign trail. Sure, we'll probably see some, but it's got to be, you have to think it's going to be few and far between. This is now Kamala Harris's party.
It is now Kamala Harris's party, but she has yet to receive the nomination officially. That may happen as early as early August. We may be waiting until the convention, but that's not as likely, we believe, here within the next probably week or two. They do have that virtual roll call that perhaps she will be the nominee, but certainly the presumptive nominee as it stands right now. No one has actively decided to run against her, and that's highly unlikely. So, and just we heard Trump on the stump today in North Carolina, and it's all about Kamala. So they've already gotten their talking points, and it is Trump versus Kamala, even though it's not official.
Yes.
That is where we are headed.
She does have enough. I mean, enough have publicly come out and said that but no voting has started, but enough have come out. Delegates have come out publicly and said she has enough. So that's not the issue at all. But to hear the Republican now talking points everywhere, the same ones about borders are. Yeah.
Radical.
You're going to hear radical. You're going to hear about our prosecutorial record. You're going to hear even Trump was on the campaign trail saying she failed the bar exam.
Yes.
Right. Just it
begins.
Here we go. Oh, God. But, if we can stop with violence, political violence, if we can get back to, just
healthy debate.
Yes.
You know what? Let's just yes, let it be about where each candidate is taking our country and the policies they endorse. We can vote on that, and hopefully we will have the best person win come November.
And well, right now, President Biden lost his fight. There was no way he could fight his own party. There was no way he could do that and fight Donald Trump at the same time. So President Biden will remain president and on the job for the next 6 months, but he will not be the candidate. It is now Kamala Harris. He has made the speech we were waiting on. Again, he just came out of COVID. I mean, we haven't really seen him out and active. It was, to be honest with you, it was nice to see him. And to be honest, and I know you feel this way. No, excuse me, I won't speak for you in this, but you're sitting there and you're kind of hoping he does okay. Like, I hope he gets through this speech.
I was holding my breath.
Any major gaffes?
I mean, look, I think the bar unfortunately was set pretty low after that debate. So anything above that, you're like, okay, that was pretty good. And that's not what you want from a presidential candidate. And so it was his time, and he has, he got to do it his way with his speech and his moment, and it was tonight. And we'll continue to follow all of the events that will continue to unfold here in this country over the next few months. But we appreciate you listening to us. We hope you have a wonderful night. You can always find us on Instagram at Amy and TJ Podcast. Thanks for listening.